This third part of Lecture 9 will be devoted to various works by artists of the Southern Song Academy. The works of these masters call for a somewhat different treatment than the literati painters, who were the main subjects of our previous lecture. The literati artists assume certain knowledge in their viewers of their paintings, that is, some acquaintance with previous paintings, certain attitudes, certain value criteria, so that their paintings require explanation today if one is to understand how they were understood and valued in their time, what the people who originally received them knew and felt, which we ordinarily don't know, have to be explained to us. So, as I said, they need explanation. Paintings by the Academy masters, by contrast, mostly don't require any explanation at all, or any such talk, where one can put a few of the literati artists' paintings on the screen and talk about them endlessly, as you probably think I did in the previous lecture. One could put a series of Academy paintings on the screen and not talk about them at all, just let them speak for themselves. Max Lohr, my teacher, had this dream of a wordless art history, and he was going to put paintings or images of works of art on the screen and simply talk, or not talk, and let them talk for themselves. Well, I'm not quite ready to do that, so I'll go on talking, however needlessly, for the next hour and a half or so. Well, there are a great number of album leaves and fan paintings and others which survive from the Southern Song, and a lot of what we'll see will be in that form, small pictures, most of them in Chinese and Japanese collections. They were easy to preserve, they were kept in albums, they were popular among collectors. One could make a whole series out of just those, hundreds of them. I had an exhibition, 1970, album leaves from the Songnian dynasties at China Institute, which had 25 Song leaves, of which only 4 will appear in these lectures, so there's lots more. Also had Chinese album leaves published at the Freer Gallery, 1961, which had some 30 leaves, only one of them in these lectures. And there are big volumes of full-size color reproductions of Song album leaves in China, published by the Palace Museum in Beijing, by the Shanghai Museum, the Liaoning Museum, and a large number of them in books published by the National Palace Museum in Taipei. As I say, you could make a whole series just out of these. Okay, I'm putting on the screen now, side by side, a section of the painting we saw earlier, attributed to Zhao Boju on the left, and on the right, a section of the painting of the Red Cliff by Chao Zhongchang, a literati painter, or certainly in that style. Now, from this time, the split that we see here persists. Painters themselves and the critics, everybody is conscious of it, in a consciousness that changes the whole character of painting. What we might call the magic realism, super realism, whatever it is, from the Huizhong court, seems to continue to in the Southern Song Academy, asserting the primacy of the actual appearances of things, playing down style. On the other hand, literati painting that draws away from the representational concept of painting and the techniques it was based on, in theory and practice favoring rougher brushwork, a tendency toward abstract and calligraphic forms, as indeed you see here, which are in principle expressive of the artist's inner life. At least that's the idea behind literati painting. Elements of archaism, which remove the picture from its subject by dropping a screen of style between the viewer and the thing we're looking at. Well, this split, which embodies important differences, is going to persist for the rest of Chinese painting history, since the Southern Song Academy style, as a collective style, which we're going to be seeing in what follows, becomes the basis for all the conservative, representationally directed painting done afterwards, mainly by professional artists. I have a whole book coming out on some of that soon, on what I call vernacular painting. And strange as it may seem to us, most of that painting, the work of the Southern Song artists working within the Academy, or outside it in related styles, most of that painting was downgraded or even scorned by the Chinese critics of the later centuries. And much of the best of it survives in Japan, as we'll see. I'll talk about that as we go on. It's a very interesting, historically important division. Chinese collectors and critics collected and paid attention to works by name artists of that period, including some who worked in the Imperial Academy. And they felt these were worth preserving, but not much else. A great deal of what, as I say, we have from Japan, including some real treasures, were not considered worth salvaging and remounting and passing on by the Chinese. So we don't have them. Okay, here's a photograph. Let's have that fill the whole screen. Oh, good. This is a photograph I'm very fond of three boys. We're up at the top of Hangzhou, up the North Sea Lodge, the place where you stop if normally, at least in the old days, on your first night there, you stopped and then you got up before dawn to see the dawn over the sea of clouds. Ah, wonderful. If you could do it. Okay, anyway, why do I put this picture on? Well, it's important for me, and I put it on the screen, as I used to do, to make an important point, really. As we were coming up the long climb that led up to this point, and really it was pretty tiring, pretty wearing. I was able to do it in those days. I couldn't now. Now anyway, I'm told there's a lift, chairlift, or funicular, or something cheating anyway, which somehow spoils the point of it. Okay, but at any rate, here as we were making our way up, with some difficulty, we were passed actually by these three boys carrying on poles over their shoulders a huge stone, and they were carrying stones up to the top of the mountain to use for building. And moreover, most remarkable, as they walked up, they were singing, and they were singing a quite intricate and interesting polyphonic, that is, different voices, song. And we noted this, and we wondered about it. When we got to the top, we got our interpreter to ask them, where did you get this song? And they said, oh, we just made it up. That's just wonderful. So what I use it for is for the value of, how to put it, unacknowledged tradition, something that you learn and then you just not forget, but you have in you, and you just do it as a natural thing, not consciously, not because it's in the style of somebody or other. It's just what you do. And a lot of academy painting is that way. In other words, I'm talking about a kind of unacknowledged, even unfelt tradition that underlies a lot of the academy painting, as well as these boys' songs that they made up. Obviously, they'd learned how to do this from childhood. They'd learned similar songs, and they had it sort of installed in them, so they were able to, so to speak, make it up themselves. Well, okay, enough of that point. Now, I spoke in the previous lecture about how certain positions have a kind of built-in rhetorical advantage without being in any real sense better. Poetic painting, spontaneous painting, painting the idea versus painting the outward appearance, all of these evoke positive responses, whereas words like traditional, academic, these are all off-putting. Now, I found that out when I was, anyway, a long story, when I was acting director of the University Art Museum, and charged with putting in what came to be called a new academic direction. Okay, it wasn't really, but that's another story. But anyway, I hope you'll agree, after looking at what follows, paintings that follow strong traditions within the academy are not simply academic in the bad sense. They can be poetic, deeply moving, compelling. If you end up, after what I'm showing, if you end up still feeling that you'd rather see another scroll of Misty Hills by Mio Run or something like that, I will have failed. And you probably belong in that other lecture room down the hall. So anyway, here we go. Okay, now, having shown that marvelous photograph. Okay, here we go. Here's a big hanging scroll in the Palace Museum in Taipei, one of two I'm going to show by this artist, or attributed to this artist. This is attributed to an academy painter named Su Han Chun, who was active around 1120 to 1165, early to middle 12th century, in other words. This one is titled Children at Play in a Garden, and the other one, which I'll show in a bit, is titled Winter Play. He was one of the Academy painters who moved to the south with the court and was active up into the mid-12th century or so. Well, when the Academy moves to Hangzhou, the whole mood changes. Something gentler, more lyrical, more, well, romantic, a dangerous word, but you commonly use a Southern Song Academy painter, and with enough truth that I'm going to use it. His paintings have an immediate appeal that have made them popular everywhere. Anyway, here is one of two large hanging scrolls convincingly attributed to him, showing, in each case, a pair of children. It's actually a little boy and an older girl. I made the mistake once of calling them both little boys, and somebody corrected me. It's a little girl's hairdo, I think, that identifies her at any rate. One of the qualities that everybody feels in Southern Song Academy painting is a sense of security, as if these were scenes of some kind of Elysium, where nothing unpleasant ever occurred, where no harsh winds blew, where nature was made for the enjoyment of man. In other words, they are ideal realms. Garden scenes are common. Some of this comes from the taste and the example of Huizong, which we saw in a previous lecture. No, excuse me, I guess we're going to talk about it in the next lecture, which will be on bird and flower painting, and I'll treat Huizong more seriously. But some of it comes also from a simple desire for peace and for real security, which people living under the Southern Song must have felt. They, in fact, were in a precarious situation. They couldn't survive long, badly endangered from the north, and they didn't survive long. Anyway, so, okay, here's the whole painting. Let me show a few details. Here's the two children, absolute concentration on what is in front of them, wonderfully depicted, reaching out their hands, playing with a kind of balance toy. Some seem to have something like 2 eggs at the ends. I don't know what this is. And it's on a garden stool with what seems to be mother of pearl inlay and black lacquer. We know pieces of this kind from the Song dynasty. Okay, as I say, a wonderful sense of intentness, concentration, and something you really feel as you look at it. Next, please. And the other one here, which was in the Possessing the Past exhibition, by the way, this was not actually attributed to him, simply called Anonymous Song, but is obviously, or pretty obviously, by the same artist, same children even. It may have been 2 from a series of 4 large paintings of the seasons that were hung successively on individual, in the different seasons of the year. At any rate, yeah, this is the other one called Winter Play. Well, this, as I say, was published in the Possessing the Past catalog, and I wrote up the section on Southern Song Academy painting for that, and I wrote up this one, and I asked a question which hadn't been, so far as I know, asked before, and a kind of question even that wasn't much asked, and that is, what are the children doing? They're playing all right, but what are they playing? Well, looking at them for a while, I came up with what I think is the right answer, which is that they are playing riding horses. They're both standing with their left leg forward, and their left arms reaching out as though holding the bridle. The older one, the girl, is holding a kind of flag, and they're galloping along or cantering along as if, and gazing down at, well, probably it was a passing tiger or something. I think we played by the Kitten. So that probably is what they're doing. I think that's a legitimate kind of question, which makes the paintings more interesting. Now, if we look at certain of the details, in other words, here are the faces of the two of them, again, with a certain concentration and a certain understanding of, I won't say child psychology, that's going too far, but at least they seem convincingly childlike. Okay, the next. So here's the kitten. We're going to see a couple more wonderfully drawn kittens by another artist later in this talk. These Song artists were marvelous at drawing animals with convincing depiction of the fur and a certain organic unity or whatever of the body, and certain liveliness and certain even psychological characterization, you might say. Okay, here we go. Next, please. Here's the rock and flowers, probably identifying the season, a blossoming tree and camellias, is it? This kind of rock, we saw an example in its original position in the previous talk on a painting attributed to Zhao Boju. Rocks of this kind, eroded by the action of water, are brought from lake shores and other places and set up, especially a place in the the south shores of the Taihu and Jiangsu, set up in gardens as natural sculpture. Anyway, this is an example of that. Quite beautifully painted. None of this really with any distinctive style. You can't say this is the way the way Su Han Chun paints rocks. It's painted that way by everybody in the academy, pretty much. And here, the same thing you could say of the blossoming tree. We will see in the next lecture examples by Zhao Ma Yuan in one case, Ma Lin, his son, a wonderful painting. And maybe others, and they're not that distinctive. We saw blossoming branches, or we'll see them in the next lecture, in paintings attributed to Huizong. Well, okay, does that somehow reduce their value as art? Does that indicate a lower level of artistic creation, whatever? Well, I would say no, but I'm old and probably conservative. The whole idea of individualism in art as a necessary ingredient is a fairly latecomer in artistic traditions, and it wasn't always there. And one could say that the effect of it on painting in the last century or so has been, I don't know, deleterious, if you want to say that. But that's another argument. Other people would say that it's what painting is really about, artistic creation, for goodness sakes. Anyway, okay, I'm being conservative, as I say. Now, going on, there are hundreds of album leaves, probably hundreds of them surviving, that portray children. Most of them, many of them, attributed to Su Han Chun. Chinese dealers and collectors tend to attribute paintings by subject much of the time. And horse paintings are attributed to Zhao Mengfu and so forth. Okay, anyway, Su Han Chun gets the paintings of children, and maybe some of them are by him. It's hard to tell. It's not the case where you have a clearly identifiable original hand. At any rate, this quite lovely leaf, I think it's in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. I'm not trying to identify the collections in all cases. A little boy lying out in the garden, relaxing, and awakened by probably the noise of the mewling of the cat over here on the right, a white cat with a dark tail, which is alarmed by the presence of a dog, a little pug dog down in the bottom of the picture, bottom central, which maybe is challenging it, or at any rate seems to be threatening it. So you have a little dramatic scene going on here in the midst of all these flowers of this marvelously serene and lovely setting. Well, as typical, as I say, of Southern Song, and it obviously was very supportive for people who may have felt quite uneasy in real fact. At any rate, fans of this kind exist, I say, in great numbers, and a lot of them have been preserved. Here's the detail of it, showing the cat and the little boy. He seems to have been playing with what appears to have been a top, the kind of thing you spin, which you see here in the bottom middle of this detail. Well, you could do a lot of work. Somebody could do a lot of work, and should, on children's games as they're shown in Sung album leaves, games and toys. And I don't know it all, but I mean it's a subject that should be done. Nobody has done it. Here are two boys and another one. This, as you see in the upper section there, has an attribution to Su Han Chun. Doesn't mean anything. Playing together a picture. Two boys in this case, one of them sort of turning, hanging onto his foot at the left, and the other one were playing with the same kind of balance toy that we saw in the other thing. And in the foreground is lying one of these kind of pennants or banners that they carry when they're playing, that they're being grand generals on horseback and so forth. Here's the detail of it. Yeah, okay. Again, some sense of concentration, great care. Both the boys are wearing, as you see, translucent, sort of gauzy jackets, red and green. Quite beautiful. Okay, next. Here's another from, I don't know who all these are, where these are, I don't really remember. I happen to have slides. A tiny signature down in the lower right, Suhan Chun. In this case, one of the little boys is about to catch a butterfly on a flower, and the other one is simply watching. Anyway, they catch the moods and the positions of children. Last for this group, here's a fan painting in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. You see the mother of these children, or some of them, inside caring for a baby, changing his diapers, and so to speak. And then here a maid looking out, watching the children who are playing outside. Now the children are obviously playing that they are some grand drama or dramatic thing. They all agree on what it is. We can't say, at least I can't say what it is. They're all holding their both hands out. Now what does that mean? What are they playing at? The one at the left, far left, is holding something. It seems to be a kind of a leader. At the far right, you see one of them who wears a kind of comic mask like an actor in the Chinese opera. And another one who's wearing a kind of mandarin's or scholar official's cap and holding his little brother with his left arm. Li Huishu, who reproduces this fan painting in her recent book, says that the child at the far left of the group, who is leading them all, is a little girl. I can only report this. I assume it's the hairdo again that identifies her, as it was in the Suhan Chun paintings, or maybe also her clothing. Anyway, all this pretty interesting to try to figure out what's going on. What are they playing? Somebody should do it. I don't want to leave the subject of Southern Sung Academy album paintings of children, however, without showing a few more, out of many that could be brought together. As I say, these should be studied as a group by someone able to do the necessary research in texts and woodblock printed picture books to identify the subjects, what the children are doing, the games they are playing. The leaves that I'll show might be ascribed to Suhan Chun, or they might be simply unattributed. It doesn't really matter. They all belong to a large and fairly consistent group, best seen as anonymous works. In this fan-shaped leaf, which is in the Palace Museum, Beijing, and reproduced as plate 66 in their 100 Sung Paintings volume, the Sung Ran Hua Tsa, the boys are playing at being military men with long spears. Two of them are tussling over one of the spears, while the third looks back at them. The setting is, as always, a garden, marked by a huge rock and some bushes. Next, another in that same collection, plate 67 in the same volume. Here is the mother and an older sister, or a maid, are supervising the play. The two boys hold what appear to be knives, but they may be just paddles of some kind. Another of them is on the table in front of the mother. They're playing a game that appears to consist of trying to knock a black ball into a circle drawn on the ground. The boy standing above this circle wears a scholar's cap. Behind the garden rock, banana palms are growing. Perhaps another seasonal indicator, which may well have matched somehow the game they are playing. All these things, these intricacies of subject matter, need research. Next. Here's another anonymous leaf of the Palace Museum, Beijing, plate 68 in the volume of the 100 Sung album leaves. The things used in some game, 2 black balls and other objects unidentifiable, at least to me, are spread out on the ground. The boys are engaged in some play in which one of them is draping a piece of white cloth or a garment, it's hard to tell what, over the outstretched arm of another one. The three he's confronting are smiling, enjoying the play. The garden rock is backed in this case by tall bamboo, and a fence stretches across the bottom of the leaf. Next, please. This is one leaf in the album titled Hikko-en, meaning the garden plowed by the brush, a collected album with some 60 paintings, if I remember right, now kept in the Tokyo National Museum. In a later lecture, 11b, I'll show and discuss a leaf in the same album, probably by Xiaogui. This is one of a number of extant leaves that show children playing a theater performance. They could be used to illustrate an essay on types of theater in the Sung period. Here it's a puppet theater, with one of the boys operating not a hand puppet, but a stick puppet, a figure wearing a scholar's cap. One of the two boys who make up the audience, the seated one, holds two red sticks and seems to be beating a kind of drum, while the other one, behind him, leans forward with a concentration indicated also by his raised eyebrows. He wears some kind of blue band on his head. The puppeteer wears a similar red band. 4 characters, presumably giving the name of the play, are written on a sign hanging below the stage opening. They are legible, but not in my old slide, at least by me. Next. The last picture in this group is the most mysterious, a fan-shaped leaf copied from an auction catalog, present whereabouts unknown. While a nursemaid watches from the left, one of the boys, presenting some kind of theatrical performance, holds in front of him a mask and a robe that looks like some rather sinister-looking man wearing a broad hat. 2 other boys beside him hold what appears to be a kind of tray with a raised rim that has a band of alternating black and white blocks around it. Another of these, whatever they are, is in the front, and still another is held by the children to the right of them, who presumably make up the audience for the performance, whatever it may be. A willow tree blown by wind stands against the garden fence behind them. Even more than the other leaves I've shown, this one belongs in that great category of Chinese texts and pictures best designated as daikao, or awaiting research. This ends my section on Suhan Chun and Southern Sung paintings of children. Many more could be added, as I say, making up a lecture of their own. But given my inability to tell you what's happening in them, these are quite enough. Now we come to an artist named Mao Song. Mao Song was a court painter under Huizong, and we don't know much about him, but one of the finest of all animal paintings from China or anywhere else is attributed to him. It's only an attribution, no signature. This is this famous painting of a monkey, which is kept now in the Tokyo National Museum. Originally, it was kept, and had been for centuries, in a Chan or Zen temple, and then it went to the Tokyo National Museum. In between, there's a time when it was in the possession of a kind of playboy collector whom I had some contact with when I was a Fulbright student back in Japan in the 50s. He was trying to sell them surreptitiously, this and other paintings, to buyers in the States who would keep secret there anyway, so he wouldn't get in trouble. But okay, leaving that aside, it went into the Tokyo National Museum where it properly belongs. Anyway, here is this lovely, famous little album leaf showing the monkey as a quiet, self-possessed creature, isolated, patient, as if sort of meditative, like a human meditative person. Monkeys and gibbons are important subjects and favorite subjects in China and Japan both. And I'll be showing other examples, especially gibbons. This is a monkey, however. I'll talk about what it is in a moment. Here's a close-up of the face. And if you look closely up at the top, up above the face, and so on, you can see little traces of gold. Here as elsewhere, you see the artist has used streaks of gold to give a certain sheen to the fur. We saw Zhao Baoju, or the painter of that scroll, using some bits of gold along the edge of landscape forms. This was a common technique of the time. Some Japanese scholar, I don't remember who it was, wrote an article about the use of gold in Sung painting. Anyway, as I say, it's a meditative creature. It's very much intent on something, no way to say what. Another detail, here's the paw and the foot. And again, you can see the gold in the fur. A good sense of an organic body, probably the way a monkey sits. I have to take this on faith. I don't really know monkeys that well. But anyway, we'll see other wonderful animal paintings. This is certainly one. There's a very interesting story associated with this picture. And this is the previous Japanese emperor, the one whose name was never spoken, but it was Hirohito, Showa era. Anyway, he was being shown around the Tokyo National Museum on one occasion, and they showed him this painting and talked about it as a very important and famous Chinese painting. And then the emperor was something of a amateur scientist, ichthyologist, fish, I guess, was his thing. But he also knew a lot about natural history generally. The emperor, anyway, looked at the painting and said, "Yeah, okay, you say this is a Chinese painting, but this is a Japanese monkey." In other words, a monkey that lived only in Japan. He was right. He knew. You can still see them down places in Japan. Consternation among the curators. They couldn't understand how to explain this to him. Finally, somebody came up with the right answer, which is that it was a monkey that must have been kept in the Imperial Zoo. Perhaps tribute from Japan. At any rate, a Japanese monkey, all right, but in Japan and being painted by a Japanese, in China and being painted by a Chinese artist. Okay, enough of that. Good story. Now we go on to another of the major academy painters, Maui. We don't know much about these people. We don't have biographies of them because nobody bothered to write them. As I say, the critics and the people who wrote about artists were scornful. They didn't think these people were worth any attention. So we know only roughly the dates and the rank that they achieved, maybe, and a few odds and ends. Okay, but the paintings are something else. The paintings are quite, as you see, quite wonderful. This is Maui. Maui was the son of Mao Sung, the painter to whom the monkey painting was attributed. We have another family lineage, in other words, within the academy. The Ma's are going to be one of those lineages, Ma Yuan, Ma Lin, with family members behind them. Anyway, here are two famous, well, let me show one at a time. I wish I had more details. I used to, and I don't know what happened to them. Details of these paintings. They're in the Yamato Bunkakan, a private museum located near the city of Nara in Japan. And very famous paintings. Excuse me. Well, these are, you might say, are perfect animal counterparts to the children in the garden painted by Suhan Chun, or countless paintings of palace ladies in the garden. In other words, they are creatures enjoying the security and pleasures of this wonderful setting. In the one picture here, the mother cat looking out at us, full face, and a kitten beside it, and then two other kittens wrestling or playing over at the left. Actually, there's still a fourth kitten you don't see immediately because its fur is orange and blends rather closely with the color of the silk. And it's seen in the slightly left of center in the lower part. And facing upward, you can barely see the kitten's nose and face. And it's looking upward at the two butterflies that are fluttering up there. So there's a little bit of something active going on apart from the wrestling. And quite beautiful painting of rocks and flowers and so on. Okay, now the next one. Yes, here are the bitch and puppies. Bitch is sort of a bad word, but it's perfectly applicable here. It's a female dog, in other words. With lilies here. The other painting had hollyhocks. Both of them combine extremely fine line with very sensitively applied color washes. The technical perfection of the Huizhong Academy painting is carried on in paintings like this. For sheer loveliness, refinement, accuracy of depiction, Southern Sung flower painting is hard to match. Okay, I wish I had details, as I say, but I don't have. Here, however, is another painting attributed to Maui, and in his style, but unsigned, a fan-shaped leaf portraying a well-bred dog in a garden setting, like the bitch and puppies in Maui's leaf. The rock with lilies growing beside it resembles the ones in the Maui picture so closely, only seen from a different angle, and the dog itself is so similar that one wonders whether the artist of this one knew the other one, or whether it might be really by Maui himself. One would like to see this as representing the father of the puppies. I say that only facetiously, but there may be some relationship between the two paintings. There must be. The dog sits as if posing for its portrait, its head turned and eyes gazing at something that has aroused its interest outside the picture. Now, going on, two lovely leaves in Japanese collection, as much as a lot of Southern Shung painting is. Here in the Freer Gallery is a painting, a fan painting, of swallows and a willow tree, or one swallow separately out here. This is a signed work of Maui, signature down here in the lower right, beneath the willow tree, and it's just ink on silk in this case. It seems quite genuine to me. I published it in my album leaf book, although it's quite different from the other paintings attributed to or signed by Maui. This one is, say, an ink only, and it uses rather freer brushwork to achieve an effect of more spontaneity and movement, especially in the rendering of the birds. Quite a wonderful picture. Here's a detail of it, of the lower right part. So what is happening here is that a painter of extraordinary technical skill is somehow able to relax his hand and work in ink only, not like our literati painters in sort of anti-realistic or anti-representational styles, but something that continues to be fully representational and evocative, evoking wind and movement and all the rest of it, keeping, in other words, the old academic skills even when painting in this looser manner in ink. Well, this is an early stage, we might say, in something we'll see fully developed in later lectures, in the work of Liang Kai, for instance, who begins as an academy master and goes on to do wonderful sort of rougher brushwork paintings, mostly kept in Japan, or paintings by the Shan or Zen artists, same way. Anyways, this is another picture. You can see this is a good example of this diagonally divided composition, with most of the matter of the picture in the lower segment and only one active element, the flying swallow, in the occupying the other segment. We saw the beginnings of that in landscapes, works associated with Li Tong. Anyway, as I say, the abbreviated styles of the later masters like Liang Kai and the Zen painters grow out of such pictures as this. And it's another manifestation of how a consummate technique, sure spontaneity of a highly disciplined painter who can relax his hand without losing these sure representational skills. Okay, going on. Now here are two more paintings again now we come to an artist named Lee Dee. Lee Dee. Lee, T-I in the old spelling, D-I in the new spelling. Lee Dee died after 1197. In some books he's said to have served in the Hangzhou Academy, but that was a mistake, as I pointed out myself long ago when writing about him. He did, we have dated paintings from him from the 1190s, so it's impossible that he served under Huizong. Anyway, he was highly honored in the Southern Shung Academy. He was appointed the assistant director of the academy and awarded a honor, the Golden Belt, which anyway we'll talk about that in connection with Liang Kai. He's followed Li Tong in a special genre of landscapes with water buffalo, which I talked about in a previous section of this lecture. Water buffalo and herd boys. Several paintings of that kind. Now this pair again is in the Yamato Bunkakan, this private museum I spoke of near Nara, which has both Chinese and Japanese paintings. On one of them, the one on the right here, represents a boy who's returning on the back of a buffalo on a wintry day with a pheasant on the end of a pole. A pheasant he has somehow caught in a snare or something like that. And then the other one on the left is a farmer and coming back with a rabbit on his pole and water buffalo behind him. Snow on the trees, wintry scene, darkened sky, all the rest of it. Very the compositions are asymmetrical again, but the figures are a little more central and bigger than some others. At any rate, the materials of the picture are reduced to those that contribute immediately to the very special feeling or mood or idea that the painting is meant to convey. Season, time of day, things that were not to be seen so much in early landscape, northern Sung and earlier, are very definitely indicated here, as typically in southern Sung paintings with figures. They are like brief poems in this regard, and are spoken of that way generally. I don't take that, for goodness sakes, to mean that I am endorsing this notion of paintings or soundless poems, etc. That's one of those old cliches that I generally dislike. Anyway, okay. But the content of the picture is not truly a sort of random or general selection of elements of the real world, such as you would find in northern Sung, where you compose them into a kind of microcosm with some implication of universality. Instead, here, you have a simple setting that harmonizes with the feelings of the subject. Human beings are far more prominent in these pictures than earlier. That's another cliche, by the way, that we need to get rid of. People used to say, in Chinese paintings, humans are not nearly so prominent as they are in Western painting. Well, it's true of some, not true of others. So let's just junk it. Okay. Very lovely mood pictures anyway. Southern Sung painters are, as I say, less concerned with the grandeur of nature, with evoking awe, than with these evocative visions, something of more conscious intent. I used to say the history of any art could be written in terms of the increasing consciousness of the artists of their means, what they're attempting, more deliberate pursuit of certain ends. And surely the emphasis by the late Northern Sung critics and theorists on the power of painting to evoke emotion, mood, subtle responses, affected also in a different way what painters of the Academy did. They do it without writing or presumably talking about it. They do it just naturally as something they inherit, something they learn by the nature of their positions and of their training. And they shouldn't certainly be undervalued because of that, I think. Okay, there's another painting attributed to Lee Dee, a big painting of buffalo and rainstorm in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition, number 40, which I'm not showing. I think it's a copy anyway. Okay, now we go on. Here is a pair of paintings. I think it's a pair, although it's not originally or normally considered a pair, and maybe not. At any rate, two paintings of Kittens by Lee Dee. The one on the left, which has been more often reproduced, signed and dated 1174. This is in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition. The background darkened, as you see, so as to set off the warm fur, which stands out against the darkened background. White pigment on the breast and on the paws and the face. The other one, looking like a sibling to it, or at any rate like a pair with it, was in the Possessing the Past catalog. They're in different albums, and the one on the right has collector's seals of a 16th century collector named Shan, famous. So they somehow did not come down together. And I was the one who thought of putting them together. I may be wrong, but at any rate, they look like they were a pair, and let's treat them as that anyway. Anyway, like the monkey and other things we've seen, here let's show the close up of the orange one. As with the monkey, the feat of representing the fur in great detail, and at the same time keeping a sense of an organic body and a sort of inner life and presence and all the rest of it, is done with very great skill. All this done without any shading, which a Western artist would normally need. All this is a kind of unassuming, unshowy technical feat. And that's true of so much of Southern Sung Academy Masters painting as I'm presenting it. And it's like the boys I showed in Huangshan at the beginning in this song they made up. In other words, the painters learn from childhood, from their training, from their fathers or their masters, if they're apprenticed, how to do certain things. And they simply do it. They don't stop and think and make it, as I say, very conscious. And maybe they don't do it in ways that are as individualistic as we might like. But with enormous skill and convincing, as they say. These paintings are much admired, as you would imagine, by cat lovers. Here's the other one, sort of sidling away a little bit, looking rather wary. Cat lovers, they catch both the appearance and the inner life, so to speak, of kittens, as well as they've ever been captured anywhere. You try to think of cat paintings elsewhere in the world, and it's hard to find others that match these so well. A detail of the white and gray kitten, in which we see how the artist, presumably Lee Dee, has captured a momentary posture of the animal and movement, with its weight on its left front foot about to raise the right one, and how the animal's mustache with stiff protruding white hairs, the alertness and the wariness of its eyes, the markings of its darker fur, are all caught penetratingly by the artist. Next, please. As a further treat for all cat lovers, I show this remarkable anonymous Sung album leaf painting of a cat in the collection of the Tokyo dealer Setsu, unpublished so far as I know. My slide may trim a bit off the top, but very little. The painting brings the cat up very close to us. It fills the entire space. The blue-black spot on its forehead, the pink inside its ears, a few darker hairs sticking up from its black tail, and the perfect oval of its shape, reflecting a deep understanding from long observation of how cats curl up. All these are caught by the anonymous artist, but most of all, next please, most of all its rather sinister smile, expressing that inner contentment, or more than that, sense of superiority to the beings it confronts, that cats seem to project. It could serve as an illustration of the Cheshire cat in Alice in Wonderland, if it were set on a tree branch looking down. This combination of deep realism and penetrating understanding of inner life is another of the qualities taken for granted in the Southern Sung Academy masters, and another for which they receive scant credit, a situation I'm trying to remedy to some degree in these lectures. Okay, let's go on. Again by Lee Dee, and again signed and dated works, this time in the Tokyo National Museum, is this pair of paintings, album leaves, pink and white hibiscus, a pair of leaves, as I say, signed and dated 1197, reproduced in various books, Tokyo National Museum. They were one of them was on the cover of my old book, Crown Publishing book. Well, these are among the loveliest of Chinese flower paintings, or flower paintings anywhere for that matter. The next lecture is going to be devoted, number 10, to bird and flower painting, and we'll see more flower paintings, but I wanted to put these under the name of the artist in Southern Sung court painting. Such things are endlessly done later in China also, but not generally with this lightness of touch, this absence of set forms, sense of direct observation. These are portraits of flowers, you might say, not flower forms that are used for decoration or conventional flower forms. The subtle shadings of color are quite remarkable. There's nothing really bright in them. Well, they're like Sung ceramics in this. Sung ceramics which show a taste for soft, subdued effects, an understated richness. Well, in Southern Sung painting generally, you could say, the grandeur of conceptions that we felt in earlier painting gives way to refinement, the aestheticism of Huizong and his court, idealization, but somehow without the coldness of the things associated with Huizong. This is my personal response to them at any rate. Flowers and birds in Southern Sung Academy painting are not generally regarded with the kind of analytical clarity that Huizong and his painters seem to have done it. Now here we'll show details. Here are the white one with touches of green. The petals scalloped, wonderful outlines, very fine outlining, and application of color that in some part covers the outlines. And you can see the veins of the flowers, also of the leaves. A deep understanding of just how the flowers is constructed and grows. Here's the other one, the pink one. This is particularly beautiful. Two blossoms. Again, still a kind of diagonally arranged composition. We have that. One of them seen fully open, the other further up, with gold lines, outlines on the petals, going in closer. The pistils and anyway, all the parts of the flower, and darkened inside the petals. They seem to here. Let's see. Next, please. Yes, here. Oh, wonderful. That's the upper one with the gold drawing on the petals. They seem to draw your gaze, one's very consciousness, into the depths of the flower, among the petals, to inhale the fragrance and feel the warmth of them. It's a remarkable experience. At least for me, it certainly is. And I couldn't parallel it in any flower painting I know from other times and places. Okay, enough of that. Those are wonderful leaves, and I leave them on for some time just so you can gaze at them as I do without... I really should just put them on and be silent, but I'm not ready to do that. It's not part of the series. Okay. There were also, by Lee Dee, our paintings. Here's one of chicks, which I'll bring back and show with details in the following lecture on bird and flower painting. Because I talk a lot about how the Sung artists are able to paint animals, or birds rather, without outlines, but with fine strokes for the plumage, just as they do with the fur of animals, and are able to give them organic body and convincing surface and a certain inner life in a very remarkable way. Another album leaf by Lee Dee in the Palace Museum, Beijing, depicts a hound walking along with its head lowered, looking as furtive and guilty in the way hounds often do, its body emaciated with backbone showing. Not a pampered pet at all, although it wears a collar. This picture is dated to 1197. There's another version of the same image, this time ascribed to Maui, in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Images such as this often exist in 2 or more versions, sometimes credited to different artists. But the inscription and signature on this one appear genuine. Okay, now going on again. This is a very famous painting of the Knick-Knack Peddler, which was one of everybody's favorites in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition. This is by an artist named Lee Song. Lee Song began life in Hangzhou as a carpenter, but he was adopted by a painter in the academy, learned painting under him, and was active in the academy from around 1190-1230, in other words, late 12th, early 13th century. He was famous for architectural painting, but he also did other kinds, as we'll see, and versatile, like all these painters. They had remarkable versatility. They could do on demand all kinds of things. And of course, the demand was diverse because the emperor, as I've said several times, the emperor and others would set poetic themes, and they would be obliged to respond with pictures, with paintings that matched them, to put on the other side of the fan, or in a facing album leaf for presentation to people and so on. Okay, this is the famous painting. Was in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition, dated 1210, also in my Skira book, and the Possessing the Past catalog and so on. Okay, it's delightful. It's one of everybody's favorites. The harried mother at the left, a peasant mother, with either all her children or all the children she's taking care of, we don't know. Anyway, one of them is nursing at her breast, at the same time reaching out for an object from the pack, the peddler's pack, and one of the little boys is actually climbing up the pack. Lots going on, active. And the pack itself, here, let's see, here's a detail. Not great in color, but at least it shows you more the objects in the peddler's pack. Extraordinary how the artist is able to depict all of these in a little fan painting, which is probably not much more than 10 or 11 inches wide. He's an eye doctor, among other things. He has representations of eyes hung around his neck, and all kinds of signs and things telling what he can do and what he can sell. Everything you want, so to speak, is here. And some of them are actually labeled. You can read them. And he has birds up seen in the upper left here. Anyway, and he goes around from village to village selling all these wonderful things. Here's a detail of the mother and her suckling the baby, and the baby sort of reaches out, as I say, for a toy, and the other children pushing her toward the pack. Now, well, we had this in our Chinese art tours exhibition, and while it was here, we discovered something. Here's a detail of the artist's signature up above in the upper left. He gives the date, the Gongwu year of the Jiaoding era, and then he signs that Li Song painted it. And then down below here, written on the tree branch, barely visible, are 3 characters reading Wu Bai Qian, meaning 500 objects. He is taking pride in the fact that he managed to depict 500 objects in the peddler's pack. Well, count them if you want to. I haven't, but I'll take his word for it. Anyway, an extraordinary number. But this trick of having a kind of hidden message, we have it in one other painting, the painting attributed to Xu Xi, a bamboo and an old tree by a rock, wonderful old painting, in the Shanghai Museum. And on that, written upside down in archaic characters, hidden, is a little inscription saying, "This painting is worth more than 200 pieces of gold," as I remember. Anyway, maybe this is a practice of painters who did technical feats and who are proud of them. Anyway, there it is. By the way, when I had my seminar on political painting, and I talked about that in the earlier in this lecture, Yang Xin, who later became the director of the Palace Museum, was with us for a year. He had the idea, and I'm probably right, I can't confirm it, but I'll just pass it on, that the popularity of this theme, Knick-Knack Peddlers, in court painting, is because it was symbolic. It symbolized the emperor and his benevolence to the common people. He went around doing good, just as the Knick-Knack Peddler carries all these things to the villagers. He brings blessings to the people under him. Okay, that's a good idea, probably true. Now then, let's see. Let's go on. Yes, there are other versions of this, several of them really, by Li Song. He was, probably was popular enough, he was required to do it several times. Here's a handscroll version in the, let's see. No, excuse me, where are we now? Yeah, handscroll, the same stuff. This is dated 1211 in the Palace Museum in Beijing. And I don't have good slides of it, but as you can see, it's more spread out, more characters, children again pulling their mother toward the Knick-Knack Peddler, a dog, and puppies, I guess it is, down here. And then next, please, the further to the left, as you unroll the scroll, you come to the Knick-Knack Peddler, very much like the other one, with another mother and more children. This one done not quite in the same detail. The things are not all colored, but fine too. Here's a detail of the peddler's pack, and as you see here, it's more just line drawing, so it tends to flatten out without having the volume. I guess he couldn't keep it up always doing it with that kind of detail. And here another detail of the pack of the peddler, very much the same kind of person. As I say, it must have been a popular subject, perhaps for the political reasons that Yang Xin suggested. Okay, enough of that. Next, please. Yes, here, going on with works by Li Song, is another very different kind of painting. As I say, these are really versatile painters. This is a fan painting in the Nelson Gallery in Kansas City, and it represents, as you see, the Red Cliff. We've already seen several versions of it. Chao Zhengcheng's long version, versions by Wu Ranzhi, the Jin artist, and by Ma Hezhi earlier in this lecture. And this is the type that shows only the main scene, where Su Dongpo and his 2 friends and the boatmen are going past the cliff among swirling water. The swirling water is especially wonderfully painted here. Water is a wonderful theme of Southern Song painting. Maui did a whole series of which we'll see examples of scenes of water, and other painters painted water. A cliff up in the upper right with Li Tong-like texturing on it, and rocks down below. Anyway, dynamic, wonderful. Here's the upper part of it, somewhere here is the signature of the artist. I can't see it. Anyway, painted in axe cut sun, but rather broader as they develop in the later works of Li Tong followers. But mainly you see this swirling water here, quite wonderful. And here down below is the scene of the people in a boat. And again, marvelous painting of water. Looking at this painting, just as I was preparing the lectures, I see a lot of horizontal cracking. And that suggests that it was mounted as a hanging scroll and rolled. And that suggests it was probably in Japan, because that's where paintings like this were mounted as hanging scrolls so they'd be hung in the tokonoman, gazed at. Chinese tended rather to keep them in albums and gaze at them on a table. Checking this, just for fun, I looked in the 8 Dynasties catalog, and indeed, of the Kansas City collection, and indeed it came from Japan, from a Japanese collection. Larry Sickman, who put together that collection, was well known for being, very conversant with the Japanese dealers and finding really great things in Japanese collections. Just a minor point, because this, if you see the condition of the painting, you can make some kind of guesses about how it originated. And I'll come to an example of that in just a minute. Li Song, a remarkably versatile painter. Now here's a painting, mysterious, wonderful, still to be deciphered really, in the Palace Museum in Beijing. This is one of those in the big 100 album leaves book. Signature of is that right? Yeah, signature of Li Song over on the left. And, what it represents is what you see. A skeleton puppet master is the title of it. The title has been given to it, or the skeleton as puppet master. The skeleton is carrying, as he's another person, as if he's a traveling peddler, carrying a load. And you see the load in the lower left, made up of all kinds of things. What looks like a mirror and various things he has for sale. And then somehow a woman nursing is seen behind him, and a platform with a mark on it saying 5 miles, Wu Li, or 5 Li, as if it's a road marker. And then over on the right, a little girl trying to hold back her little brother who is crawling toward the skeleton puppet. Wow, what is this about? Been a lot of speculation. I put this to a Japanese specialist on puppets, and he wrote an article on it, but without really resolving it. Nobody has really come up with a proper solution. I'm going to take the time here with one of my brief asides to just suggest what the possibility might be. But okay, let me show the details. Yes, here's the skeleton. How anatomically correct it is, I'll leave it for somebody else to decide. But anyway, he's wearing a translucent robe and kind of grinning as skeletons tend to do, and also wears a scholar official's cap up there as if he has some sort of rank. And here, the detail of the skeleton, dancing, mysteriously and wonderfully. Okay, what does this mean? Now, I can't answer that really, but I'll just show 3 much later Chinese paintings to give some idea. Children operating puppets themselves appear sometimes in later Chinese painting, and I have an article I never wrote, but I'm going to post the materials for it on my website eventually. They seem to represent children somehow indicating the future direction of their careers, and mothers watching. Here in a painting by Ren Yi, that's way up in the 19th century, the child is operating a puppet that is kind of scholar official with a fan, sort of caricatured. Here, next please. Here is another child. This is a painting by Chen Hongshou, I think, or maybe his son, Chen Tzu. Anyway, in the Zhejiang Academy, or China Academy of Art collection, which shows a little boy and a puppet, not a puppet, but a toy, which is a military official with his flag and so forth, as if riding on a horse. And the little boy is playing with that, indicating probably that he is going to be a general or a military official. This one has an inscription that may give some clue to the originally written for the person it was painted for. And here in a painting of the early Qing period by an artist, name doesn't matter, after or closely based on Chen Hongshou, A mother with two children. The one in the foreground is going to be a general. He's pulling a toy like the one we saw in the earlier painting with the military official in it with his banner and all the rest. And he himself is carrying a pennant and looking quite military. And then the other son in the middle left here is the one who's going to become a scholar official. He has his hair done in a kind of well, like the scholar official's cap. And he looks very studious, and he's holding his hands the right way. And his mother is handing him a book. So this mother is going to have one of each, so to speak. These were the two professions that were considered really worthwhile for males to pursue. Okay, enough of that. That's just an idea. And as I say, I leave it for other people really to figure out or find literary evidence for just what this painting means. The skeleton in China, as in memento mori pictures of medieval Europe, stands for death. And it may be some dark meaning, a theme, somehow forecasting the a dark parody of the pictures that forecast the future career of the child. In this case, some premonition of the fall of China to the Mongols, ? Anyway, dark things to come. That's just a guess, but something like that is behind the picture, I think. Okay, now, going on. The Hangzhou boar. The boar is, in this case, means a kind of tidal wave. And near Hangzhou, at the entrance of the Chentong River, which flows from the sea here, at certain times of the day, at certain times, a great tidal wave would come up, and people would gather on pavilions on the shore and so on to watch this. And this was a subject of painting. And one such painting by Lee Song is in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition. I don't have a slide of the whole, but this on the left now is a slide of a detail of it, which shows the couplet written at the top, which he was set to illustrate, inscribed by this woman, Yang Meizi, the consort of the emperor. And the poem, the couplet, is translated in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition, quote, "Leave word not to lock the double doors, the nightly tide is waiting to be viewed under the moon." So this evocative theme is given to the artist to illustrate. And Lee Song paints this small, lovely picture of the tidal boar coming up the river. I have here beside it another fan painting. I don't know, not attributed to anybody I can remember. Anyway, I think it's Palace Museum in Beijing, with the tidal boar coming up, and the distant shore shown in a kind of curve, partly to conform with the shape of the album leaf, partly, certainly not the round. They didn't have an idea of a round earth. At any rate, curious, interesting composition. We went to the place when we visited Hangzhou way back, both delegations really, and we were taken to the place from which they used to gaze at this. And this is what this picture, this photograph is what we saw. In other words, they built a bridge that sort of spoils it all. So the Hangzhou boar is presumably still coming up, but you don't see it with quite the poetic whatever that it used to have. Now, before leaving, two more things of Lee Song. Among the paintings with Lee Song's signatures in the Palace Museum in Taipei, there's a pair of them which have often been reproduced and exhibited and so on. One of them representing a dragon boat and the other a palace by the water. And both are done in this fine line architectural manner, so to speak, jiehua called, and colored. And it's possible that Lee Song would have done architectural painting and then colored it. And they both have signatures of Lee Song, and they've generally been accepted. However, I used to use these when I had really better slides than these I have now, for my students to make points about how you have to look at the physical condition of the painting. And this one of the dragon boat here, we have a detail of it too, but the detail doesn't really show all that much extra, except the very neat, careful coloring that's been done. Okay, you can see even here, and even more on a slide I used to have that's rather better in this sense, vertical cracking, serious vertical breaking. And what does vertical breaking mean? It means rolling horizontally. And rolling horizontally means it was originally part of a handscroll. And if you start thinking that way, you realize that these two were originally parts of a handscroll from which these two parts were cut out. And its signatures of Lee Song added. Here, finally, this is a bad slide of a handscroll of this type. In the Yuan dynasty, among an artist active in the Mongol court named Wang Zhenpeng, painted numbers of scrolls, and others painted them in imitation, showing indeed dragon boat races and elaborate paintings of dragon boats and buildings, palace buildings on the shore. And from one scroll of this type, someone cut the boat and the building out and mounted them as album leaves and added a Lee Song signature and fooled everybody. Well, everybody except us anyway. Enough for that. Now we go on to still another quite remarkable painting attributed to Lee Song. This is not clearly by him. There's no signature. So it's only an attribution. But it's the kind of painting he might well have done. I think the period may be about right, and the type of painting, although it's very different from anything else of his. This is a painting that I reproduced in my old, compelling image book in the first chapter, using it to represent a kind of visually oriented painting done by, I was making the point that artists who took visual approaches, who tried to represent things in one way or another the way they really looked, instead of expressive brushwork and all the rest of it, tended to be downplayed and eventually, all but forgotten in China. In other words, this was not a popular kind of thing. As I put it, the word people always seem to have won out over the image people. I think those are terms that get borrowed from Gombrich. At any rate, here, now on the screen, is the first section of a handscroll in the Shanghai Museum, attributed to Lee Song, representing the West Lake at Hangzhou. If it's by him, it's an example, that is, of the extraordinary versatility of these artists. And in any case, it seems to be the work of a highly trained professional. It's not an artist who is not an amateur artist playing with ink. It's an artist who somehow relaxes his hand and blurs the forms somewhat, as if to make them as if they're seen from a distance. Okay, in other words, what it represents is the West Lake at Hangzhou and all the buildings along the shore and all the rest of it as seen from a distance, as seen from a particular hill. And I've been up that hill several times. I took my delegation there on the last day of our time in China, and we had a marvelous time. I have slides of that. Okay, at any rate, here for comparison is a photograph of I've made myself from this rocky hill. I'll show it in a minute. Of this end of the right end, seen from the hill, of the West Lake, with the dike and the bridges and so on. And then in the foreground is a large sort of semi-island where there are all kinds of interesting things, old buildings. The Shilang Yinshe, a certain seal society, famous society of artists and calligraphers and so on, is located here, and so on. Anyway, we're well known to West Lake people. Now, here's a detail of this section. What the artist has done is represent the West Lake and the buildings on the shore, which for then were many, many more than now, and everything about it as seen from a distance through some atmosphere. Okay, then next, please. Here, if you get in closer, as we do here, you can see exactly how he's done this. The trees are blurred. Certain features like the bridge and certain large buildings are relatively distinct, but all of it drawn in paler ink. Occasionally, darker passages as if there's a break in the mist or something, but remarkably duplicating or approximating what you would see if you're looking at the West Lake. I mean, it's a visually oriented painting. Well, I've talked, of course, about Southern Song painting generally is taking an approach closer to the actual perception of painting. And we saw the remarkable picture, the great painting attributed to Mr. Lee of Shenzhen in earlier part of this lecture. And this is sort of in the same direction of that, except it's a particular place. Again, reproducing or approximating a visual experience in a quite amazing way, way beyond anything that is possible in Western art until well up into the... I keep saying that over and over again. Well, the point doesn't need making. Here, closer up. If you get really detailed, and I really made details of this picture just to make this point, then it becomes blurred. You can't really make out very much. Here's the lakeshore, on which, as I say, there were many more buildings in old times than there are now. No, now they're getting built up again, but the wrong way, with lots of lights. I went there recently, a few years ago, and the lights were really ruining it at night. So I don't want to go back, but it was quiet and lovely when I first knew it. Anyway, here's a close-up of buildings and the roofs drawn a bit darker, protruding above the trees, if you can see them. Okay, next, please. And here's the other end, at which you see the city of Hangzhou, where the present city of Hangzhou is located. Again, I'll have a slide in a moment. A pagoda here, which is still to be seen, except that the protruding roofs have dropped away, fallen away. I think it fell down and was reconstructed, if I remember right. At any rate, famous old pagoda. And then beyond it, the city of Hangzhou. And then in the sort of upper middle here, the distant shore where the Zhejiang, or present-day China Academy of Art is. The Academy of Art with which I am most closely associated. Friends and supporters and so on there. I've lived there for periods of time and given lectures there and so on. And they are publishing some of my works. Okay, anyway, and I was taken there by people in the Central Academy, in the China Academy, to see the old sites where the Song Painting Academy was, the palace and the academy. And we climbed one of the hills just to the right of that. Okay, now here's a slide showing the hill that I took these photographs from, and part of one of the dikes, the one going out to the kind of island. Okay, a rocky passage up here. I and my delegation climbed among these rocks, had a wonderful time, and made our way down past the pagoda and down to the lake again. And here, seen from another view, here is this rockery, and you can see people on it. As I say, it's a wonderful experience to climb through the rocks and through tunnels. And elsewhere you encounter the remains of old temples and villas and so on. Marvelous place in those days, maybe still some ways. And here's the pagoda and the city beyond. And here's a slide that shows the city in the distance, very much the way Lee Song depicts it, that is blurred and just barely visible. So you see again how he is really getting something optically true. Now going back to the end of the painting, here it is, with the pagoda in its original form, and what is the present city of Hangzhou, and bridges, so forth. Here, coming in closer, as you move in closer, as I say, it becomes the way the artist has blurred parts of the picture or hidden parts of it, and had only roofs protruding, and of course the pagoda and a few things to identify it, and boats very tiny. Again, going in, this is the distant shore, and the place where the China Academy of Art is now located, and the place where the Imperial Palace was when this was the capital back in the Southern Song period. Wonderfully vague, blurred, impressionistic, in quotation marks, painting. Okay, here coming in closer, an inlet with boats finely drawn. This, if it is Lee Song, this is an artist who is quite capable of, detailed drawing of architectural subjects. But here, deliberately relaxing his hand and softening the depiction and making it, as I say, as if seen from a great distance. Willow trees, reeds, everything. And finally, the last slide, still closer. As I say, if you get in really close, then it begins to blur a bit too much, and you're looking at the technique of the artist more than you're looking at the scenery. Anyway, okay, wonderful picture, attributed to Lee Sung. Now then, on to another artist in the Academy. The most prominent figure painter in the Southern Sung Academy was probably Liu Songnian, active in the later Southern Sung, late 12th, early 13th century. Contemporary, that is, with Maui and Xiao Gui, the two great masters whom we'll see in Lecture 11. Best known, as I say, as a figure painter, rather conservative artist. There's lots of paintings attributed to him, and some of them quite reliably, I think. There are 3 signed paintings of arhats, or lohans, in the National Palace Museum in Taiwan. One of them was in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition. I won't show those. They're reliable Sung works and interesting in their way. But I'm showing here a large, and I have only a black and white slide, but I do have details, of a large leaf, album leaf, horizontal album leaf, attributed to him and maybe by him. It's plausible. It's titled A Celestial Maiden Offering Flowers to a Bodhisattva. And here you see the Bodhisattva at the right, surrounded by 3 monks, then another monk standing midway. Okay, this is probably, I think this was originally a picture of Vimalakirti's debate with the Bodhisattva Manjushri, and somehow it's missing the picture of Vimalakirti, which would have been at the left of this, somehow cut off and maybe mounted separately and lost. So I showed a version of that composition attributed to Lee Lin back in the lecture number 8 when I was talking about Lee Lin. Anyway, here are the details. Here is the Bodhisattva, and it's probably Manjushri. You can see the little pussycat-like creature under the chair, which is really the lion that identifies the Bodhisattva Manjushri. And the whole picture somehow answers to this kind of composition. Anyway, very fine painting of the heads, especially of the arhats, of the priests, maybe arhats, whatever they are. One scene sort of 3/4 view, one full face, one profile, with real bone structure suggested and musculature. So really fine figure painting was still going on. I'm not showing much of it, but this is a very good example of it. And here is the scene of the fairy woman offering flowers, probably with a Vimalakirti image to the left originally. I shouldn't leave Liu Songnian, however, without showing, at least briefly, the works that are best known and most reliably by him. The 3 paintings of arhats, Chinese lohans, Buddhist holy men, originally the disciples of the Buddha, in the National Palace Museum in Taiwan. I'm showing them only briefly because of my general policy of leaving out Buddhist painting from this series, but they merit our attention as being among the safely attributable surviving works by Southern Sung Academy masters. All 3 of them are signed and dated in correspondence with 1207. They are no doubt survivors from an original series of 16 or 18 arhats. This one was included in the Chinese Art Treasures exhibition of 1961 and is reproduced in the catalog as number 49. The painting is about 117 centimeters by 56 centimeters in size, and it's painted in ink and colors on silk, like most Academy paintings. As the catalog text, which is written by Ashwin Lippi, points out, some features of the composition, such as the symmetry of the 2 deer at the bottom and the way the arhat leans on the limb of a tree, suggest that it's based on an earlier prototype, probably of the 10th century. The grizzled arhat here gazes down at the deer, which have come to pay him homage, their heads raised. The acolyte, or the boy attendant, stretches out his arms with his sleeve between them to catch peaches that 2 gibbons are dropping, again as tribute, from the tree overhead. The style is polished, tempering the religious subject with touches of courtly elegance. Next, please. From this one, I'm showing only a detail that I happen to have. The arhat sits on a mat, one arm resting on his knee, one leg curled under him, looking leftward at an acolyte, his eyebrows slightly knitted, his mouth open. His exposed ribs and arms reveal the emaciation brought about by religious austerity. But his earrings, the rich-colored robe that he wears, his mat, along with the boots in front of him, tell rather of aristocratic beginnings, as if he had, like the Buddha himself, begun as a person of noble birth. He carries a long staff used for prolonged walking, from which he has just sat down to rest. The next, please. In this third of the paintings, the arhat is seated formally in a chair, in the posture assumed by religious personages receiving visitors. The smaller figure before him, with long hair and beard, represents a king from some far-off land who's come bearing gifts, which appear to be fruit and dishes. The artist holds his left hand, that is, a small blue bottle, out of which a mysterious vapor streams upward. A proper Buddhologist could probably tell you what this is. I cannot. His eyes are narrowed in concentration. His mouth is open as if speaking. Next. In this detail, we see the objects on the table in front of the arhat. 2 bronze containers with flowers in one of them, and in the other an object hard to recognize. It appears to be a carving of some kind, with a lion's or dragon's head with open mouth on the left edge. Notice the rendering of wood grain on the armrest, and the way the pattern of the cloth covering the table follows and reveals the rectangular shape of the tabletop underneath. Such refinements of observation and depiction were expected of the best Southern Sung Academy masters. They can scarcely be seen in the works of later artists, however excellent and skillful they may be otherwise. The next and last. Finally, for Liu Songnian, another signed a genuine painting by him in the National Palace Museum, this one dated to 1210, and representing a drunken monk writing. He sits on a rock beneath a pine tree, his robe draped loosely over him, writing on a scroll that's held by one of his boy attendants. The other one at his left holds the inkstick and the inkstone. I have no detail, only the slide of the whole, which reveals little besides the whole composition. The twisting of the pine tree, the expressive placement of its branches, and the way the vine winds around it may remind us of a pine tree that we will see in a painting done some 36 years later in 1246 by Ma Lin, another late Sung Academy master to whom a whole lecture will be devoted, Lecture 11C. The dark area in upper right of this one appears to be the evening sky against which the hilltops are set. Landscape with figure compositions locating the figures beneath and beyond overhanging tree branches or banks of earth, drawing our gaze into these depths, are a new development in late Sung Academy painting. Okay, that's all for Liu Songnian, and we go on to other Academy artists. Okay, next, please. This is a large. I'm putting in here, although it's not really attributed to Liu Songnian, a painting of the that I showed briefly earlier when I talked about political painting. This is a titled "Greeting the Emperor at Wangshan Village." Now, as I said before, this is one of 2 interpretations of this painting. If it is Greeting the Emperor at Wangshan Village, then it's the Tang Emperor Xuanzong coming back from exile after the revolt that happened under his rule, and being met by his son at a certain place with all their attendants and so on. A very moving historical event, which would have had political implications for the Emperor Gaozong and his restoration of the Sung dynasty after its defeat in the north. On the other hand, as I said before, yes, here's the detail of the section of this, of the main section of it. The other interpretation was by my old friend Lee Lin-san, who believed that it's a recorded story in which the Han Emperor Gaozu, first Han Emperor, his old father was too too frail to visit his home village. And so Gaozu simply moved the entire village to a place outside or near the palace walls. And then the old man went out there to visit it. And there he was met by his old friends and all the village people all bowing down to him and so forth. Well, okay, whichever story is true, and I'm not taking sides, it's quite a wonderful figure painting. It's historical or quasi-historical figure painting. And Liu Songnian is, I guess, the most plausible artist for somebody who could have painted it. Now let me show, here's a detail of the main figure group with the sun, if it's that, in the red robe, and the old man in a white robe, or here even closer. You can see them up. And all their servitors, all the faces individually drawn, all with different kinds of robes, caps and other things indicating their rank, all no doubt very carefully done. It's a kind of painting maybe that would have been done to present to somebody, who knows what. And then in other parts of the picture, you see the villagers, all very respectful, bowing, people down inside their brushwood fence in their rustic hut, and here old people barely able to kneel, like myself, really trying to get to work against the natural stiffness of their joints, and a little boy with a bare bottom. You often see little boys that way. The mothers don't bother to put pants or diapers on them, just let them squat in the curb when they need to, etc. Anyway, okay, and quite lovely drawing of the would almost be a genre scene, but this part of it anyway. Villagers, and they're paying respects to their old friend or old townsman, if that's the right interpretation. Now I'll get to some album leaves and other kinds of paintings that cannot be so easily attributed. And I don't mean to connect them especially with particular artists. Now here is a black and white photo of a painting, a fan-shaped painting that is now in the Cleveland Museum, and mounted up above it an inscription. This painting I discovered myself in a dealer, Kochukyo, near Nihonbashi, in Japan, and got very enthusiastic about it and tried to persuade the Freer to buy it, and then Brundage, failing both cases, and finally told Sherman Lee about it, and he bought it for the Cleveland Museum. And it's a painting I'm really very fond of. Well, when the Metropolitan Museum had a Words and Images Symposium in 1991, a famous and distinguished Chinese scholar, I won't give his name, but because I'm disagreeing with him, gave a paper on words and images and the importance of coordinating or linking words and using them to interpret images. That was his point. He was a book reader. He was a word person, and so forth. And he says he translated the couplet up at the top, which says reads quote, "Infinite space, a bright moon night, pale light, the early autumn sky." And he said no viewer of the painting reading these words could fail to distinguish these, to recognize these four elements in the picture. Well, I published this in my lyric journey book and said, well, this viewer can avoid it, that is. And I proceeded to show what really is going on in the painting. And I pointed out, I think rightly, that the two didn't go together originally. There's a fan painting, and somebody has mounted it with a square album leaf with a couplet on it. And that isn't the way it works. If it's a fan painting, it would have been a fan calligraphy on the other surface, or vice versa. A square painting mounted opposite a square calligraphy scroll. Okay, so they didn't belong together. And forget about bright moon and the rest of it, I said. Let's look at the picture and see what's in it. And when you look, much, much more interesting than infinite space and the bright moon and all the rest of it. Here is the painting in color. Wonderful little leaf, fan-shaped leaf. And in the sky, the moon painted with a bit of gold, dim, far hills, a wall, which is probably the wall of Nanking, a building seen over the wall, and then on the in the foreground, on the canals which lead into and around Nanking, two boats drawn up side by side. Okay. Now we go in. Here's the detail of the upper part with the moon in gold and with this building. As I say, this painting had an old attribution to Ma Hudger of all people, but it doesn't mean anything. It is some very fine Southern Sung album leaf. Anyway, next please. Now when we get down to the lower part, we begin to see what the painting is really about. The two boats are drawn up side by side. Don't know, they're not related in any particular way. And through the windows, we are able to see, as the artist allows us to see by painting them, showing light inside and painting the figures in color, two figures. On the one on the right, here's a woman playing a lute and presumably singing, as though she is a courtesan maybe, or anyway, she's an entertainer. And then in the other one, a man who looks like he's a scholar. I think he has books behind him and is sort of awakened or attracted by the sound. And so the theme of the painting really is his listening to her. Here, getting closer into the right boat, up above a drum with gold for the binding and all the rigging and all the rest of it very intricately and beautifully drawn, a sleeping boatman in the upper right here, and then this woman seen through the window, here coming in still closer. Well, it becomes a kind of blur when you get too close. But she is strumming her lute and singing, and the sound, which you have to imagine, is reaching, the next please, on we go, is reaching this scholar who rises up, as I say, from his studies. There seem to be books in the background, and is listening to her sound, and here as he is still closer up. Well, any cultivated or literate Chinese viewer seeing this and recognizing what's really happening is going to be reminded of a famous poem by Bo Zhuyi of the late Tang Dynasty, the lute song Pipa Xing, in which the poet hears a woman playing a lute and investigates and finds that she was once a famous courtesan in the capital and so forth. A famous poem. And this scholar listening to the sound of the lady playing the lute is surely going to evoke that. As I say, in literate Chinese viewers, I mean, there are lots of other cases in paintings that I'm showing of responses that a really literate or cultivated Chinese is going to have to it, which I can't because I'm an outsider. But anyway, I can't really fill them all in. But with these images before you, many of you will be able to see things that I can't. Okay, let's go on and finish up this talk now. Here are two more paintings which I reproduced, but badly in black and white reproductions in the Lyric Journey book, both in the Palace Museum in Beijing. Here is one with a lady standing in a doorway, and her servant outside seems to be catching fireflies to put them in some kind of lantern to make a kind of poetically improvised lantern. Whether she is waiting for a lover, whether she has come out from something going on inside, we are left to imagine. A lot of Southern Sung paintings are mysterious in this way, and I use these to make that point. They conjure up imagined narratives or allow poetic or narratives, poetic themes. And this is one really good example. A night scene, definitely a night scene. And here another one, fan painting, in which a man down below in the lower left with a woman and a servant behind him in the boat is going along a canal, perhaps in Hangzhou, lots of canals there, and looking up at a house and the balcony of a house where a woman is looking out and a servant behind her. Now, what is passing between them, or what might pass between them, again, we can only imagine. Nothing it may be that in both cases, it may be that a facing piece of calligraphy gave some hint of what the painting is about. As they exist now, we can only imagine. But they are mysterious and evocative and poetic and, in their way, quite wonderful. Well, I want to bring out this quality of Southern Shung paintings in many of the best examples with these examples, even though I'm showing only a few. Okay, going on. Now, on a much less lower poetic level, but still a fine painting, this is a fan painting in the Palace Museum in Taipei, attributed to an artist named Feng Daliu, who was in the Southern Shung Academy. Not very important. We don't have anything else that I know of attributed to him. It was done to accompany a fan of which we do have the reverse fan. I should mean what was on the reverse side of the fan. That is, you can see by the way here the damage to the from the middle bottom going upward, where the spine of the fan was. Sometimes you can see these. Sometimes they may have been never much used as a fan, so they don't have this. At any rate, the inscription here in this case is a quatrain by Wang Wei, the great Tang poet, written out in the calligraphy of the Emperor Gaozong, and it reads as this. This is somebody's translation. From the palace adjoining the Taiye Pond, I gazed at azure waves. Thoughts of autumn multiplied in the thin, pure summer air. All night long an autumn breeze stirred in the duckweed. Scattered everywhere, pearls of dew filled the lotuses. And the painting is indeed of a lotus pond and various water birds, ducks of different kinds down underneath. A single swallow in the air. Must be another swallow somewhere. Birds are almost always shown in pairs. Maybe, well, there's a damage over here on the upper left. Maybe it was in that. Anyway, quite beautiful painting of lotus and birds. Okay, I use this as an example of a case in which the painting and the calligraphy both survive. Well, I'll finish with finish this long section with a few more album leaves that I happen to have slides of. Most of these are in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, actually. Okay, here is one. This is actually the Palace Museum in Taipei, I think. This is as an attribution to Lee Song, as you see in the upper right here, those of you who read Chinese. Well, my slide of the whole isn't very good, but I have a good detail. It's a house, a private house with pine trees and so on, located near a larger cluster of buildings further on in the upper right here, but somewhat isolated in itself. And then when you see the detail, you see that the owner of the place, the host, seen in the left here, is having a banquet or a drinking party or whatever with friends. And another guest who's arriving is being met by a servant at the gate. And then in the upper right, you see some servant preparing things to drink and so on to carry in. So it's the whole little narrative of a drinking party in a private house and a guest arriving and so on, all built into this single album leaf, which album leaves often have stories that are really quite elaborate and on in them, as we've seen. This also in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. This one is, it has an old attribution to Maui, but that doesn't mean anything. And they catalog it as Confucius's encounter with the hermit Rong Chiji. Well, in that story, it's about Confucius meeting up with a 90-year-old musician hermit. And Confucius recognizes his contented state expressed in music, as they say, and asks about why he is so happy. And the old guy replies, what's his name, Rong Chiji, replies that there are three worldly joys: to be human, to be a man, to enjoy longevity. And he himself has all three, and that's why he's so happy. On the other hand, this could be simply a scene of visiting the hermit, because there are numbers of paintings of this type, very similar in composition, from the early Ming period, done by court artists, of emissaries from the emperor sent to invite a hermit to court. And the hermit, this is the person seated here under the pine tree playing the chin, refuses to come. He said he wants to stay and be a hermit. Here are some details from it. Here is the left section, the chariot in which the if it's the emissary of the emperor or else Confucius came, seen in the upper left. Here's the chariot and its attendants, and here is Confucius or the emperor's emissary, whoever it is. It's a southern sung leaf. There's some sort of Li Tong style in this broad texturing of the rocks, and here is the hermit, whoever it is, or Rong Shiji, seated playing the chin, which is what hermits and recluses and so on often do just to pass their time. This very quiet personal instrument here in the detail. Okay, and finally, this is an album leaf in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. I don't have a slide of the whole. This is only the lower part of it. Up above there are palace buildings, and this one shows the Emperor Minghuang, this mid-Tang emperor, seated on a horse surrounded by his attendants, waiting for his concubine, Yang Guifei, to mount a horse. Actually, there's a version of this which I was responsible for the Freer Gallery buying, and I published it in my Skira book and published an article on it, Yang Guifei mounting a horse, quite similar, from the early Yuan dynasty by an artist named Chen Chuan. But this is a sung version of it, and it's supposed to have been done way back in the Tang dynasty by the famous horse painter Han Gan. At least a painting of that kind is recorded. So at any rate, here is a southern sung version of it, and here are a couple details. This is the emperor waiting, watching. I could put on the Chen Chuan version. You could see how similar they are, surrounded by his attendants. And here is Yang Guifei, who was quite portly and had to be helped to get on her horse with eunuchs and attendant ladies watching, helping her. A lovely fan painting. Okay, so much for this lecture, which has been on court academy painting of the Southern Sung period and a variety of subjects. I've enjoyed very much giving it.